And then, and you didn't even know about the down zone, though.
Yeah.
By Al on that.
I found out. Yeah, I'm not sure where it's going. It's a little bit.
What's the difference between the steakhouse and the church? The one that looks just like the rest of them. They're all the same across the world.
I don't know.
Y'all have a gym right in the walk in.
I've never been.
You never been to Southern Morning? I played in morning basketball league. You'd have 2 out orders on the court at one time. I was one of them. Those were the rules. I just wanted to play ball, you know, in as many leagues as I could. But they made us watch this crazy video. Yeah.
Did it? Maybe this isn't the spot to talk about it.
There's readers out there.
You're done.
I'm screwed in this town.
Microphones are behind you.
Crap.
So, we can talk about this next week.
I will. Yeah.
We will, this will be our 10-second warning, and then we will begin. Welcome to our August 1st, 2013 Gilbert Town Council meeting. I am Mayor John Lewis, and as listed on the agenda, I call the meeting to order, and we will begin with an invocation and pledge of allegiance. The invocation may be offered by a person of any religion, faith, belief, or non-belief, as well as council members. A list of volunteers is maintained by the town clerk, and interested persons should contact the clerk for further information. Tonight's invocation will be offered by Pastor Scott Jones of Central Christian Church of Arizona. After the invocation, Vice Mayor Ben Cooper will introduce our scouts and the scout that has been assigned to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pastor Scott. We invite those in council chambers to please arise.
Would you join me in prayer? God, we're gathered here tonight because we're created for a purpose, and you've given us the freedom to live out this purpose in every single day of our lives. Thank you for life itself, for the freedom to respond to your initiative in our lives, for the honor that you give us to be trusted with responsibility. Thank you for all of the leaders in this room and the assembled council, for Mayor Lewis, and thank you for the work that you've given them to do. We pray that you would give them wisdom to know what to do, to discern a lot of different choices in the midst of many options. Give them courage to make the right decision in the face of opposition, the ability to work together in harmony, and the confidence to know that what they do is right. For the agenda tonight, we just pray that you would give them the assurance that what they do matters, and the things that are done here tonight can actually change people's lives. We trust you with these things. In your name, amen.
I'd like to invite all the scouts up front. Mayor, I apologize for not having them up here. Okay, Wesley will be leading us in the pledge. There's the flag.
I pledge you allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Very good. Thank you so much, boys. If you'll line up here, we're going to give you an opportunity to introduce yourselves, maybe tell us your name and your rank. And we'll also be providing you with a copy of the United States Constitution to help you as you're fulfilling your merit badge requirements. So go ahead and lead it off.
My name's Tyler. I'm 13, and I'm a Life Scout.
I'm Holland Gailey. I'm 13 also, and I'm Star Scout.
Braden Barfish, and I'm 12, and I'm First Class Scout.
I'm Austin Bateman, and I'm a first class.
I'm Zachary Weber, and I'm just a scout. I am Mason Brooks, and I am just a scout as well.
I'm Wesley Brooks, and I'm almost tenderfoot.
Mayor, just a scout? Is there such a thing as just a scout?
He's just a great scout.
I want you guys to know I'm an Eagle Scout, but I'm just a scout as well. So it's great to have you here. Thank you so much for being here. And Mayor, any other comments?
No, it's. I know school's about to begin. You've probably had a fun summer at all the scout camps, and thank you for your service, and have a great school year.
Thank you, boys.
Lisa Maxwell, our deputy clerk, will now conduct the roll call.
Mayor Lewis.
Here.
Vice Mayor Cooper.
Here.
Councilmember Cook.
Here.
Councilmember Daniels.
Here.
Councilmember Peterson.
Here.
Councilmember Ray. Councilmember Taylor.
Here.
I declare a quorum is present.
Thank you. Agenda item number 1, Councilmember Cook will read the Pillar of the Month responsibility.
This month's highlighted pillar is responsibility. As council members and town staff, we are dedicated to being reliable and fulfilling all obligations. We accept responsibility for our decisions, not making excuses. We are committed to being accountable for the services we provide.
Thank you. Agenda item number 2 is to recognize 2 of our local faith groups for some special things that they did. If they could please come forward. And I'm not sure if we have anyone here from Mission Community Church, but also Central Christian Church. Please come forward. As part of our July 4th celebration, on Sunday night, June 30th, a community patriotic music program was held. We've had a chance to go to the Mission Community Church and thank them in person. And the program is now going to be broadcast 16 times in the month of August. For those here at Council Chambers, you can see the 16 times. It'll be on the same date and time for the next 4 weeks in August. This will also be in the local newspaper, and we'll have it on the town website so you can see it. It is a spectacular program. Local talent, various musicians, and they did a great job, and we thank again Mission Community Church for being the host for that site. And to my right, July 4th, Fire in the Sky Central Christian Church of Gilbert was the host site, and we thank you for doing that. Pastor Scott Jones to my far right, Amy Woodward to my immediate right was the key organizer, and we will also be delivering in person an official recognition of appreciation in a few weeks. But I wanted to just hand the mic to the 2 of you. Anything else that we needed to say thanks, but anything about the Fire in the Sky that the community should know? Did everything go well?
Yes, it was just a great event. We had thousands of people there enjoying fireworks and community, and so we also had a canned food drive, so we were able to donate to the United Food Bank.
I think you've given us that invocation to get us through the night too, but to the 2 of you, Central Christian Church, all of the efforts that so many in the community made for a wonderful July 4th celebration, thank you, and if you could join me in a nice round of applause. Serena, if you could come forward. On the agenda, we have a special recognition. This is Serena Adama, who is about to go to Japan. We have, Serena, for you, an official congratulatory certificate from the town of Gilbert. And part of this just describes you're an athlete attending Desert Hills High School. You'll be a senior next year, is that right? Junior next year. You have this talent of softball, baseball, and you've been on the boys' baseball team, and the only female on the team. And they just love you, I understand, and one of the star players. And with that talent, Serena is going to be representing Gilbert as a member of a special team. Now, I think I'd like to, let's show the short video, and then anything we miss, I'll have you fill in the cracks. So, please. All right, while that is still getting set up, this trip to Japan, what team will you be on, and tell us a little bit more about it?
I'm not sure of the name, but I know it's just all girls.
Welcome back.
Sorry, go ahead. You can go ahead.
Okay. It's girls from all over the country, and I'm the only one from Arizona. And I've only talked to a couple over Facebook, but I've never met anybody that I'm going to be playing with.
To Councilmember Peterson, we've been given a few Japanese words trying to help out, but she'll be representing Gilbert, Arizona, in the United States in Japan next week. And this is a little bit more about it, please.
I love him.
It was her grandfather who first put a bat in her hands. He's at most practices and every game.
It's really kind of a neat thing to see her be able to do that. She's a great ball player.
What they thought recently confirmed. Serena was selected to represent the USA in Japan.
It's going to be fun.
Serena is one of 12 from the U.S. on an All-American girls baseball team. She leaves in August. So does her grandfather.
It's just surreal.
When she's not on the ball field practicing, she's practicing something else.
I think it's like konnichiwa or something. Or is that hi or something?
Hi, hello, good afternoon. They all work. And so does a girl playing baseball.
I don't think any girls ever played in the Major League Baseball. So, I mean, who knows?
If hard work and desire mean anything, I wouldn't bet against her. In Mesa, Kevin Kennedy, 12 News.
Serena will head to Japan with her grandparents in August. The team will play a series of games and get a chance to see the country. As for her mom, Veronica is set to be released in September.
And you have some family here. I think sister, grandparents, would they come on up for this? We're going to take a picture with Serena, and then we'll have all of you here at Council Chambers give a nice big round of congratulations and encouragement. And here's your official certificate. On behalf of the town of Gilbert, here's your Gilbert chair. Jennifer, please. Another one of our residents who has received a special recognition and is also about to go not to Japan, but to a place called Atlantic City. And this is Jennifer Smestad. She was just announced as Miss Arizona and will be representing Arizona Gilbert at the Miss America pageant. I also have, Jennifer, a official congratulatory certificate from the town of Gilbert. And it has a lot of great information, a little bit about your background. And this is not to put you on the spot for the Miss America pageant by just giving you the mic and asking questions, but we'll show a short video clip, and then if you have a platform, which all the contestants do, maybe tell us what that is. And I understand you have an interest in the future in psychology, and yet that passion for singing will continue to be a key part of your life too. But we'll watch the short clip, and then I'll give you the microphone.
Our new Miss Arizona 2013 is Jennifer Smith.
Yes.
Let's see, when it was announced who the next mayor was, I think I didn't know. This is quite the honor. And on behalf of Gilbert, there's so much we would like to express for all the years that you've been doing great things in the community. But take just a moment and tell us a little bit more, and then maybe let us know what dates you'll be in Atlantic City and what date we need to have the TV on to cheer you on.
Well, when I was little, I used to always say I wanted to be the first girl in the MLB. That didn't happen, but good luck to you. I love baseball, so I really admire you for that. And my platform is an issue that each contestant is required to have, and that's something that means is so personal to you and that you want to express throughout the year. And so mine is Tourette syndrome awareness and advocacy, and that's because when I was 10 years old, I was diagnosed with Tourette syndrome. And it was a very hard time. It was something that was very hard to go through, and there were times when I even didn't want to live anymore because it was so difficult, and I mean, it's unexpressible. And so I tried natural Chinese acupuncture, and that actually did take away my symptoms, and I was so blessed and fortunate for that. So now my goal is to stand up here today and be able to give hope to children going through the same thing or similar issues, and I hope to inspire them and give hope to them and their families as well. And Miss America is going to be on September 15th live on ABC, and I'll be in Atlantic City competing for the Miss America crown.
September 15th. Get on the website, official Gilbert Holiday or something like that. But we'll also invite your family to come up for a picture, and this is the certificate that I'll give to you, and best of luck to you. And here is your big cheer to give you the go from Gilbert, please. Big round of congratulations. Councilmember Peterson, Child Support Awareness Month, agenda item, please.
Thank you, Mayor. First of all, I'd like to call up Janelle Sullivan with Child Support Services. Thank you. This kind of seems like an obvious obligation in life, and a very serious obligation, and we're grateful to talk a little bit about it tonight. I'm going to read a couple parts, and then we'll turn a little time over to you to fill in the blanks for us. So. Whereas financial support represents a part of parental responsibility, and consistent financial support minimizes conflict between parents and increases the likelihood of children reaching their full potential, and whereas with the focus of partnering being of great importance, the Department of Economic Security is changing the name of the Division of Child Support Enforcement to the Division of Child Support Services, with the division taking steps to effectively educate and train all child support staff and partners to provide positive customer engagement and having available quality supportive services within the community to effectively aid parents as they work to meet the physical development, emotional growth, and economic stability of Arizona children. Now, therefore, John W. Lewis, Mayor of the Town of Gilbert, does hereby proclaim August 2013 as Child Support Awareness Month in Gilbert, Arizona. Thank you. So tell us a little bit more about what's going on here. Thank you.
Okay, well, first of all, we did have a name change because we want to change the atmosphere of coming into our offices. Sometimes everybody's afraid to come in there. And so we've educated our staff. Not all non-custodial parents are men. And so we have changed the way that we talk to people and the way that we handle our cases. And we did that by getting the community involved with us. And, you know, we took some focus groups and came up with some new ideas. Our lobbies have changed. They have bright, beautiful pictures of children from all over the state, and it's just been so exciting to see the change.
Thank you so much for that, and I think that is a cause worthy of applause. Go ahead.
I'd like to invite up Jean McNicky. Did I get that right? Okay. And then Tiffany Isaacson. Please join me up here. Why don't we start by letting you just introduce where you're from and why this matters.
Jean McNicky, Gilbert Fire.
Tiffany Isaacson, Phoenix Children's Hospital.
Why this matters. Go ahead, Tiffany.
Well, we're going to talk about drowning prevention because drowning is one of the top causes of injury-related death for children in Arizona. Last year in the town of Gilbert, we had 6 children involved in water-related incidents. 2 of those children did not survive. Drowning is preventable, and August is a high-risk month for child drownings to occur.
Thank you. So we're pleased to present this proclamation to raise awareness here on Drowning Impact Awareness Month. Let me just read some selections here and then share this with you. Drowning Impact Awareness Month will raise awareness that the number and impact of child drownings in Arizona affects everyone, and whereas the drowning incidents in Arizona take the lives of the equivalent of a classroom of children each year, whereas families can take simple steps to protect their children around water to avoid the tragedy of the unnecessary loss of life, and whereas keeping children healthy and safe is the goal of water watchers at Phoenix Children's Hospital, fire departments, and other prevention institutions in Arizona, raising awareness will increase understanding and education of effective ways to prevent drownings. Now, therefore, Mayor Lewis of the town of Gilbert proclaims August 1st through the 31st, 2013 as Drowning Impact Awareness Month. Please join me in a round of applause in presenting this.
I do have the pin on.
Thank you.
And we give full support and thank the 2 of you and others for the great efforts. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thanks. Do we have some requests?
Not for communications.
Next on the agenda, we will jump and then we'll come back. Agenda item number 42 would be current event updates from the town manager. Manager Banjer, please.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. I'd like to report that after a national search that we just recently wrapped up, we received over 100 applications for our fire chief position, and we narrowed it down to 6 candidates, had a series of interviews involving community stakeholders, organizational leaders, and members of our council. We are pleased to announce that we are going to recommend our interim fire chief, Jim Jobush, for receive appointment to the position on a permanent basis. We will bring that forward to you for your August 15th council meeting for your consideration. Jim did an outstanding job in the interview process. We're very pleased to recommend Jim, and he has the full support of the leadership of the organization, and we look forward to working with him.
Mayor Lewis, I think I saw a smile. I think I saw a smile.
And when we make it official in 2 weeks, the round of applause will continue, but we'll put that on the agenda for August 15th. And Jim, congratulations. Agenda item 44 is current events from the mayor, and I think it would be fitting to bring that up right now. Related first to our fire department, tomorrow will be the official back-to-school shopping event where the firefighter team has worked diligently, and there are 50 children that will go shopping tomorrow, and we thank them for that. We also, in a more of a somber note, thank members of the fire and police team a couple of weeks ago for the fundraising efforts that they made with the hockey game in support of our 19 firefighters at the Yarnell Fire that gave the ultimate sacrifice. And I also wanted to, on behalf of the town of Gilbert and the town council, thank our firefighters and police officers for all of their work. We received from the Prescott Valley City Council a letter of appreciation for additional efforts that our own Gilbert Fire and Police Department made in support after the tragedy of various events, of specific things that we did, and we have a lot to be thankful for. This is a time of year where we do celebrate our freedom, and our public safety officials are part of that local freedom that we enjoy. And so if you could join me in a round of applause for those in our police and fire departments. We return to the systematic approach to the agenda, and number 6 is communication from citizens. Vice Mayor Cooper, do we have any requests?
No, Mayor.
Okay, let me just confirm as I look through council chambers if there are any requests. Okay. We will move to the consent calendar. As the agenda states, items listed below are considered consent calendar items and may be approved by a single motion unless removed at the request of council for further discussion or action. Vice Mayor Cooper, what requests do we have related to the consent calendar?
Mayor, I move that we approve items 7 to 31, noting that items 20, 21, and 22 have been removed from the agenda, and that there is a change or an amendment to the June 27 minutes under item 31.
Thank you.
Second.
May I amend my motion? Sorry. We're also going to pull item 29 for discussion tonight.
Okay, thank you. There's a motion and a second. Please vote. That's approved with a 6-0 vote. And so, Vice Mayor Cooper, I believe 29 would be the one that we would go to. Councilmember Peterson, please.
Mayor, I don't have any problem with this item at all tonight. In fact, I'm very pleased with it. I just kind of have a follow-up question to it. I noticed here they were looking at eliminating the difference between commercial and non-commercial fees for the event, site rentals, and I think permits as well, right? And one of the comments there was the costs are the same regardless of if it's a commercial or non-commercial use, so we should charge the same fee. I totally agree with that, and I'm just curious if staff will be coming forward with maybe changes to other fee schedules along the same line of thinking.
Mayor, Councilmember Peterson, absolutely. We are looking to do a full analysis of our fee structure throughout all of the Parks and Recreation Department, and it is our intent to definitely consider that moving forward.
Thanks so much.
Any other discussion? We'll entertain a motion.
With that, Mayor, I move to approve item 29.
Is there a second?
Second.
With that motion second, please vote. That's approved with a 6-0 vote. Thank you. Vice Mayor Cooper, I'm ready to go to public hearing. Does that work? Okay.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Do we have requests to speak on any of the items on the public hearing?
We do. Item 39.
39, okay. On the agenda, as stated, items 32 through 39 will be heard at one public hearing. Anyone wishing to make comments may do so by filling out a form. And with the 39 being the key item, let me just look to council on agenda items 32 to 38. Do you have some items you wanted to have some discussion on? Okay. I will open the public hearing on agenda items 32 through 38. And I will close the public hearing on agenda items 32 through 38 and entertain a motion.
Mayor, I move that we approve items 32 through 38 as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
With that motion and second, please vote. Those items are approved with a 6-0 vote. Thank you. Agenda item 39. We'll turn to our tag team town attorney effort. Susan Goodwin, if you could, Susan, take just a moment and give a brief overview of 39 as we had discussion on it in a prior council meeting. This will bring us all up to speed.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. Since this started while I was town attorney, Mike asked me to go ahead and continue it, and thank you for that, Mike. This started out as one of the ordinances that we were bringing forth to update the municipal code. That was a council request that we reviewed the municipal code. We identified changes that needed to be made. Chapter 42, when we got to it, we noticed that the ordinance or the code section was out of compliance with state law that had been adopted a few years ago. So the ordinance that was brought forth previously conformed the code to state law. At the last council meeting, there was a discussion and there was a request that we come back with 3 options. One being the option that was presented previously, which conforms the code to state law. One, to provide for metal detectors, and if there are no metal detectors, then there would not be a request to put a weapon in a storage unit. And the third was just to repeal the section in its entirety. So you have those 3 options. I will say, and I would like to clarify for the record, that I wrote the council communication. It was a continuation from the prior item. I put into the staff recommendation portion of the council communication that staff was recommending option 1. Staff takes no position on this.
Thank you. Before we continue discussion, and thank you for the additional research, there are 3 options in the council communication. The second option, we did request that there would be further information and study, and so I just wanted to ask the 6 of us, my assumption as we looked at the costs is that most likely option 2 is not one we want to pursue, and it's more option 1 and 3 we'll have some dialogue on, but is that a correct assumption? Is option 2 one that we're not really considering? Councilmember Peterson, is option 2 one that we need to spend some time on?
I doubt it, Mayor. I would prefer it over option 1, frankly, but certainly not what I would like to see.
Okay, thank you. The only reason why I say that is as we have discussion in the next few minutes, and even our communication from citizens, at this point, I'll assume option 2. We have it in writing. It's documented, but we'll be talking about options 1 and 3 in the next few minutes. And to the council, because we have studied this, and I know there will be some good dialogue and feedback that we'll want to share, would this be an appropriate time to have it's 2 citizens that wish to speak, to have them speak? Okay. But please, Vice Mayor Cooper.
Mayor, we'd like to invite Corey Carpenter to come forward, and he'll be our first speaker, and then John Chiazza, second speaker.
And Corey, as you set the stage, you will be asked to state your name for the record, and if you're a Gilbert resident, and then you'll be given 3 minutes to speak.
Okay, my name is Corey Carpenter. I am a Gilbert resident, have been for many years, and my comments are brief tonight. I just want to be publicly heard that my support is to allow Gilbert citizens to carry personal protection, whether that be firearms or other means, including in public buildings and town buildings. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chiazza.
My name is John Chiazza, and I am a 24-year resident of Gilbert. Having guns in public buildings is asking for trouble. We are protected by Gilbert Police at our city council meetings and our courts. Many times in this chamber, it is filled with school kids and their families. As we have seen so many times, all it takes is a deranged individual to come in because we have allowed him to just come in with his weapon and start shooting. With others in the chambers carrying a weapon and more shooting takes place, it could turn into a very tragic situation. If this is passed, I will not be coming back to this chamber. I do not feel comfortable sitting around people that have guns that I don't know, and I don't know how they would react in any kind of situations. Guns to defend our homes and your family at your home is fine. I believe and respect the Second Amendment. Guns, however, should not be allowed in public buildings or places where citizens gather for civic activities and have public forums. I feel very secure in all of our public buildings in Gilbert. We have sufficient protection with an armed and trained Gilbert police officer for any type of event that may arise. Let's make professionals handle all situations. Of all the years in council meetings that we have never had any kind of situations where weapons had to be drawn. Filling this chamber with our citizens that want to be part of a public forum should have a gun-free environment, as it has always been. I want to also add, as I have before, some council members continue to want to push their own extreme political agendas on the people of Gilbert. I feel by continuing to have members on our council pushing radical agendas as this is damaging our outstanding reputation. I urge you to please think of the citizens. Remember, being a moderate can prevent reputation from being ruined. We do not need guns in our public buildings. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Vice Mayor Cooper, any other requests that you've received?
No, sir, I haven't.
Okay, thank you. Any comments at this point from council members? Any questions any of us would like to ask? Councilmember Daniels?
Just one clarification for Susan. Apologize for not giving you a heads up on this. If we were to do nothing tonight, what would end up being the outcome? It's my understanding state law would then supersede anything that we did here at the local level?
We've treated, your ordinance has been out of compliance for some time. It would just continue that situation. Eventually, we hope that you would correct the ordinance.
But
maybe I didn't say enough there. We have not been enforcing it. We cannot enforce it, and so it would just continue not being enforced.
So let's just say there's a reason for us to look to our courts to help decide. Would they use the state statute as then our default position?
Well, what the statute says is that if a person is requested to remove their gun and put it in storage, and there is a storage unit readily accessible, then they have to do that. So we cannot, any action we would take in compliance with your current ordinance would not be upheld. You would lose whatever litigation might follow. Does that answer your question?
Yes, that does. Thank you, Susan. And one more follow-up. Can you define public building for us?
Oh, yes.
And maybe someone else can ask a different question.
Yeah, I can pull it. I have it.
Sorry, I sprung it on her.
Okay, I have it. I had it. It is defined in 133101 as public establishment is what I'm looking for. Oh, thanks. A public establishment means a structure, vehicle, or craft that is owned, leased, or operated by the state or a political subdivision of the state.
Follow up then, I'm just trying to clarify, that would include this building?
Yes.
Recreation centers owned by the town, would that include the public safety building, or at least the police and, fire?
The public safety building is a public establishment. The court section of that building is governed by Supreme Court rules, which mandate metal detectors and other security devices. So whatever you do does not affect the operation of the court.
Councilmember Peterson?
Mayor, I think I've made my position pretty clear. I do want to respond to a few things I've heard. If we're really talking about whether or not we're going to have guns in public buildings, that's another issue. But the only way to make sure that we don't, if we're uncomfortable with that, is to have some enforcement for it. There's no way in the world somebody who's willing to break the law to kill you isn't willing to break the law to ignore the sign and come in with a weapon. So it doesn't make sense. And any of the situations I can think of where we've had very tragic massacres in mass numbers in public property, every situation I can think of has been an honor system gun-free zone. I think their ineffectiveness is well shown and well proven. And it's not this meeting that I'm worried about. We have a good guy with a gun here. We've provided that protection for ourselves. The way you stop a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun, and we have that. But if we're going to ask our citizens to surrender their firearms in other situations where there's no enforcement to prevent those with ill intent from having weapons, all we've done is disarm the honorable citizens or the good guys, and that I don't see how that helps. So to me, we've got natural law that tells us self-defense is a natural right. If we're not going to provide that person's defense another way, they maintain that right to defend themselves. We shouldn't remove the tools they need to do that. We have the Second Amendment. It refers to, and I quote, the right of the people to keep and bear arms. It's a right of the people, as far as I'm concerned. That's what the Constitution calls it. And I have a couple stats, and then I'll listen to others' thoughts. The Atlanta suburb of Kennesaw, this is fascinating, and I'm not advocating it. Please don't misunderstand me, but it's an interesting statistic. They mandated that heads of household had to keep a firearm in their homes. I don't think that's appropriate. They should have the freedom to decide. But after they mandated that, residential burglaries dropped by 89%. In late 20th century Britain, one other statistic, well, it's not exact numbers, but it's trends. When gun control laws were tightened, rates of murder and armed robbery increased. That's just two. I know there's a lot more out there. What I'm saying, Mayor, is if we're seriously contemplating item one, option one of an honor system gun-free zone, and we think that's sufficiently secure for our citizens, I think all we can do with option three is make us more secure by allowing the honorable to carry.
Thank you. Other comments? Councilmember Cook?
So I have a show and tell. Just give me a quick moment. And this is a question for Susan. I know we chatted about this last time. I know that we have some lockers just outside the door. To my left is a Pelican case. It's fairly used as a firearms case. And I don't believe that a firearm that would fit in this case will fit in any of those lockers. So I guess the question I have, if we were to adopt option number one, And if an individual were to carry a case into a public building like this and maybe there was a firearm in there, what would we do?
Well, if you don't have a storage unit that's readily accessible, that gun, that firearm will fit in, then you would have to, you could not require him to put it in a storage unit that's not readily accessible.
And that individual would be able to freely
Yes.
walk around in a public building here in this building, in this chamber, or any of the other buildings that are...
He would be able to walk around at the public areas of a building.
Right, the
He doesn't
public
have the, today he doesn't have any right to go into the back areas unless
Sure.
he's got business back there. So
Yeah.
generally, yes, where he would otherwise be allowed to go, he could go with that weapon.
Susan, I asked that same question earlier in the week, and this is an assumption that if option one were the preference of the council, there have been some discussion with town leadership, and I might just ask Town Manager Banjer, you did have an answer for that, and it could even be if it doesn't fit. There was also a question, what if all the lockers were filled? What would happen? And can you share what you passed on to me?
Mayor, members of the council, from our discussion, again, we only have the authority that's provided to us through the state statutes on this matter. We have discussed situations like that where we could request a patrolman from the police department to come over and be in the building just in case something were to occur, or we could ask the individual if they would mind if we stored a long rifle over in our police department in a secure setting, but they would have to voluntarily agree to that. We would have no ability to enforce it.
Thank you. Please.
So I'm, obviously very nervous if this were to obviously be in any public building. I would love to understand what our options would be to enforce, an individual that would be carrying something like this in a building, and I'm not sure I have the answer that's satisfactory for me.
Thank you. Anything else on that?
Mayor, members of the council, in that situation, we could buy some lockers that would accommodate a long rifle. But again, if depending on how many we have, if they're all occupied, we still run into the same situation.
Thank you. Okay. Other questions or comments? Councilmember Taylor?
Patrick, can I ask a follow-up on that? Are there any other ordinances or policies where a law enforcement agent would ask for someone's weapon and they would be required to hand that over?
Mayor, Councilmember Taylor, I might ask our Chief of Police, Tim Dorn, to come up and respond to that.
Mayor Lewis, Councilmember Taylor, Tim Dorn, Chief of Police. Timing on this is very timely in that the Arizona Court of Appeals just within the last couple of days had a ruling that indicates that a police officer does have the right, even under a consensual stop, to take temporary possession of a firearm until that stop is completed for the safety of the officer and the safety of the public.
Thank you. And Chief Dorn, do they have to have cause?
It has to be during a lawful contact by the police officer.
Okay. Thank you.
Councilmember Cook?
So Chief, again, this case, I mean, you and I recognize it, but how would you approach someone that was carrying this case? Would you ask, and if they refuse to say what was in the contents of the case, what would we do?
Mayor Lewis, Councilmember Cook, in an event like that, as the manager explained, if there's suspicious circumstances and the person is not willing to tell the person here in the town facilities, or we believe that there's a possibility that the person could be armed, one of a couple things is going to happen. A lot's going to depend on the circumstances. That is the person upset about something, what's his mannerism or her mannerisms at the time. If nothing else, As the manager stated, we're going to put a police officer right next to that person the entire time they're in our facility to make sure they're not a threat to us or the public.
Vice Mayor Cooper.
Okay, so I'm just trying to understand a few things that have been said. If there's a storage locker option available when the site, and there's several of them, and then somebody comes in with something like that, you have a right, if you will, to go up and speak to that person about their intentions and ask them to check it. If we don't have that option, are you able to approach them and, I mean, help me understand the differences between option 1 and 3 as it relates to you doing your job?
Mayor Lewis, Vice Mayor Cooper, that's correct. If we have an ordinance that says that someone cannot bring a weapon in, or they have to secure the weapon upon the request to do that to stay in the building, then we have the right to approach that person and to, the first thing we're going to do is try to assess why they're bringing a weapon into the building, but we're going to request voluntary compliance with the law. As with most laws, that's what we hope for, is voluntary compliance, and the vast majority of our citizens, even if they don't agree with the law, will voluntarily follow the law. In a situation where somebody is not voluntarily following the law, then we have the right to enforce that law, and we'll take action that's necessary to enforce the law. So the problem that we have, if we allow free access into a public building with a weapon, we have no legal right to contact that person to determine why they're bringing that weapon into the building, what their intent is. Basically, all we can do is stand by and watch, and we can't do anything except react to a threat once the threat has taken place.
And just as a follow-up, is there anything else as you look at options 1 and 3 that are before us tonight as it relates to your job trying to protect us? Anything else we should know about?
Vice Mayor Cooper, there are some concerns that I have without having an opinion one way or another as far as making a recommendation to you which way to go, but I do have some concerns about the accessibility of firearms in public buildings. The first concern that I have is that we deal with, in our public facilities, a lot of controversy, and a lot of times when people are upset either with other people or they're upset with things that are going on within their community. I do have a concern with the free accessibility of bringing a weapon, introducing a weapon into conflict. Most of the tragedies that we see that involve firearm violence involve incidents where conflict has been involved, and out of a heat of passion type event rather than a planned event, we have an act of violence that takes place because a firearm is accessible. That's the first issue or concern that I have. Secondly, we already talked tonight that the public safety facility is a public building. It's questionable under the current law if we have no ordinances that prohibit someone from bringing a firearm into other than the jail part of the facility. Do we then have to allow people into the police department, public safety area with firearms unless they're in custody under arrest? That obviously is a big concern of mine based on the nature of the business that we have in our public safety facilities. The other concern that I have is what we did talk about with encountering an act of violence, that we basically become standby and have to wait until a threat presents itself to encounter that threat. The other issue with that is the position that places our police officers in, that once somebody presents a threat, if we have other firearms that are then within the building and people choose to become involved in that when we have police officers present, now we're expecting our police officers in a split second to make a decision who the good person is and who the bad person is, which provides an opportunity for a disaster to happen that we don't want to see happen. So those are the primary concerns that I have over the accessibility of firearms in public facilities.
Mayor, members of the council, one moment, please. I'd make one slight adjustment to what was just said, and that is the state statute that prohibits municipalities, for example, or political subdivision from passing an ordinance other than the state statute, makes an exception for courts, law enforcement agencies, and prosecutorial agencies. So in fact, there could be a prohibition against bringing a weapon into a law enforcement facility.
Thank you. Councilmember Peterson?
Mayor, that's good to hear, and in fact, that would be something I'd be happy to recommend. We have a building full of good guys with guns. There's security there. So if we don't want to allow guns in the police department, it makes total sense to me. It doesn't worry me at all. If there's something that happens, you got lots of people on hand to put a stop to the bad guy who ignored the rules. So again, just want to make sure we keep focused on the point. If there's true enforcement, that's one thing. But if there's just willy-nilly, Chief Dorn talked about, well, if they have the right to carry, we can't do anything about it. We're talking about if there's a police officer there to enforce something. We're not providing that in most cases, in most buildings most of the time. If it's there, and then we could have a different policy. So,
thank you. Susan?
One of the other things we looked at over the last couple of weeks, as a result of a conversation that took place on staff, was what happens if everything is repealed, if that section is just repealed. And I think the ultimate result or the ultimate discussion is going to be the same, but I came to the conclusion, and I think Mike Hamblin agrees, that even if there's no ordinance, the state law doesn't require an ordinance. The state law simply says that if you're requested to put your gun in a secure storage unit and one is readily accessible, then you are required to do it. The reason an ordinance was brought forth was because you already had one that was out of compliance, so we wanted to fix it. But even if you don't have an ordinance, you still have the ability, if you have gun lockers, to make that request and have the same result. So really, options, as it turns out, and I don't think I realized this a couple of months ago when I first drafted the 3 options, options 1 and 3 are the same. But if you adopt option 3, you still can and will have the discussion of whether or not you're going to adopt as a matter of policy, whether staff can request, you put guns in a gun locker and whether you have gun lockers. So you ultimately end up with the same discussion. But as a result of the discussion, I felt that I should point that out.
And I think that has a lot to do with why we purchased the gun lockers, to proactively try and address it, because 1 and 3 do have a lot of similarities. At this point, can we be reminded, as Councilmember Daniels asked the question about definition of a public building, we do have some gun lockers, and other than the police and fire department, do we have gun lockers right now in all of the other public buildings that have been identified? So it would be town hall, development services, our recreational centers, and public works?
Yes, Mayor, Senior Center, Public Works, our community centers, that is correct. All buildings that would be open to the public.
So we have expended the costs associated with that and are ready to follow that procedure if that's the direction we went? Correct. Okay. Councilmember Taylor?
Susan, can I ask a follow-up on that? Because that didn't sound consistent with the answer that Councilmember Daniels got in terms of enforcement. When you responded to Councilmember Daniels, I thought that if we did nothing, then our police would not have the authority to do that. Did I misunderstand?
I don't think I said that. I think the chief was heading that direction, and that's why I felt that I needed to raise that point, because it's one I didn't fully appreciate until the last couple of weeks, when I said, well, what happens if we repeal the whole section? And I looked at the statute, and it doesn't require an ordinance. It is what it is, and the requirements are what they are, whether you have an ordinance or not.
So they would have authority under the state statute to request someone to put their firearm in a locker?
If a locker is readily accessible.
A locker of the right size is available. Okay.
Councilmember Taylor, just to clarify, my point was that if the decision was made to allow people to bring firearms into the building, not making that enforceable, then we would have no ability to make that approach and to contact that person.
Councilmember Peterson?
Mayor, just to be clear, because this can get confusing, the bottom line is just by repealing the ordinance, by doing option 3, we would also need to establish policy that staff is not to confiscate firearms if we wanted that effect of having people able to carry. So that's the point, is that it's not enough just to repeal the ordinance, we also have to set a policy. So I'm suggesting that, not just to repeal, but also set that policy.
Thank you. Okay. Vice Mayor Cooper?
This is just a refresher for me. What do our personnel rules say about bringing weapons to work if you're not sworn?
Your personnel rules prohibit employees and contractors within the scope of their work from having guns in the workplace, and that is authorized by statute.
Okay. Any other comments? Councilmember Cook?
As it relates to some of the state buildings, do we have any idea if they have lockers in their public areas? And do they have lockers that accommodate different size firearms?
Mayor, members, Councilman Cook, members of the council, I'm not familiar with state buildings. I am familiar with the buildings in the city of Phoenix. They do have lockers, signs prohibiting entry, and they do make the request, and I believe they have lockers of different sizes.
They do have varying size lockers in their public areas?
That's my best educated guess. I have not seen them.
Do we know if other municipalities have followed the approach of having lockers? Is that the general direction that they have taken?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. There are some municipalities that have taken the option 3, but the most prominent or the most common answer that we've seen so far from other cities is that they've taken the option 1.
Especially in the the Valley of the Sun metropolitan area. There are some outlying areas where they make no request whatsoever.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Cook and then Councilmember Daniels.
I just want to be clear. If we did nothing, we can still provide the lockers as a policy. If we did option 1, we would still provide lockers as well. So it seems like option 1 and option 3 to me are coming closer together.
That is correct.
Is that right? Is that what I'm hearing?
That is correct. Councilman Cook.
Councilmember Daniels.
Thank you, Mayor.
I'm sorry, Councilwoman Daniels and Councilman Cook. If they have option 3, then you'd have to implement a policy, but you would be acting under state law rather than town ordinance. So under state law, you would be requesting someone to turn over a weapon, and then, but only if you had a locker in which to place it. And if that person still refused, they'd be committing a crime of misconduct with a weapon.
That's all I wanted to make sure, that again, if we did option 3, again, the state law is the governing laws here, and then from Patrick's perspective, he would maybe direct staff to get the appropriate size lockers to comply with the state law?
That is correct.
Sorry, Mayor, Councilmember Cook, you would need to direct a policy to staff to ask people to comply with the gun lockers. You would need to provide policy direction to us to proceed down that manner.
So back to the question then, as it relates to state law, what agency actually can ask an individual then to surrender their firearm?
It's a crime not to surrender it if a locker is available. That would be a police function.
But not a staff function?
Well, a staff member could ask it, but they would call the police to issue the citation or make the arrest.
Okay. Councilmember Daniels.
Thank you, Mayor. I think this conversation can quickly spiral into an issue about gun rights, and I am confident that there isn't a single member on this dais who does not believe in the Second Amendment and who feels very strongly about that ability. Our previous law prior to the state enacting a new state statute was that we did not allow firearms in our public buildings. And what's interesting to me is I didn't receive any emails from citizens. I did not, at least from my understanding in public discussions, that there wasn't any concern about that particular law from any of our council members. But as we are attempting to comply with state law, we've now raised a bunch of questions amongst ourselves that we may or may not be able to answer. I think it's interesting that the state legislature does not allow the public to carry in state buildings. And the reason I think that's pertinent is because A, they came up with the law, and B, we have a very pro-gun state legislature. And so I think we can reflect some of those attitudes by what we do here today. I would like to see us become compliant with state law through our code. I think that that's an important aspect of what we do here as a governing body, is to make sure that we are in compliance with the new laws that come into effect. At this point in time, it does seem most reasonable to me to keep the gun lockers and to allow our police department the access that they need to, not to our guns, but to have conversations with the citizens that come into this building. And we know that fists and other weapons can be used just like a firearm or any other quote-unquote weapon. And so I think we need to be a little bit careful about turning this conversation to gun rights. That's not what this is about, in my opinion. This is about specifically coming into compliance with state law. And so I am, of course, open to hear options about how we can do that, but let's keep in mind that our state legislature does not allow the public to carry in the gallery or in any other state-owned building. It is my understanding that some members, I guess, on occasion carry, but that it is not legally permitted amongst the public. And so let's take that into consideration. Let's not talk about gun rights. Let's talk about how we can come into compliance.
Councilmember Daniels, that's very helpful. And when we close the public hearing and look to give direction, would a summary of what you just said, you would be comfortable in taking option 1 and giving guidance?
Yes, and I think we may need to provide, part of our job is to provide our law enforcement officers with the tools that they need to do their job, because we have given them the task of keeping the public safe.
Okay. Councilmember Cook, as I've listened to you, please clarify, is that the direction you would like to go to?
Well, to me, just being in compliance is really the goal. And to me, if we did nothing, we still have the option to be in compliance. So I'm not sure having an ordinance and then also having a state law, to me, I already have one. So it sounds like we have the option to be in compliance with state law without really doing anything. We can do some actions as it relates to policy, but it sounds like we could easily be in compliance by just following the state law, to me.
Okay.
I'm just looking that we are in compliance. However we get there, I'm okay, as long as that we're able to accommodate, some of the things I was mentioning earlier.
Okay, thank you. We'll go Councilmember Taylor, then Councilmember Peterson.
Thank you, Mayor. And I don't disagree that the goal should be compliance. I would just suggest that there's more than one way to be in compliance. So maybe I'll just throw a thought out here that we can process. Because I had an interesting phone call yesterday with someone who, Vietnam veteran, CCW carrying, pro-gun type individual. He is a regular visitor to the state legislature, and I asked him about the point about that. He says on the Senate side, they have the enforcement mechanisms to, take everyone's weapons away. On the House side, it's not there. And he says on a regular basis, he goes into the House galley with his sidearm and watches, some of the proceedings and things like that. And it's on a regular basis for this particular individual. His other comment is related to what we heard earlier today, is that he felt less safe if he's not able to provide a form of protection for himself by carrying his choice of protection into a public meeting. So it's kind of an interesting, some people feel safe if you haven't, some people feel safe if you don't, because we've heard both of those tonight. So to me, the question is in hitting the goal of compliance, what is the way that we can reach that goal and have the highest level of public safety? Is how I'm kind of processing this. So to me, when I reflect on the history that we've heard from Councilmember Peterson's in the gun-free zones, I mean, there's definitely a national trend of people that don't have guns to protect themselves, and there's some, incredibly sad tragedies that we're seeing. So just to bring it to a head, at least where I'm leaning here, is more towards the third option with two provisions to work on wording here that at least I think there's gaps, and maybe I can be corrected. One is wording specifically related to the police department building, maybe the fire department building, but it sounds like we need to have more assertive wording there to prohibit that, and I would support that. And then the other is to allow wording, to allow people to carry into. To me, that helps meet the goal, but provide the highest level of public safety for individuals that want to do that and choose to provide that, just given what we're seeing in the national trend in gun-free zones. That's where I'm at on that, Mayor.
Let me go to Councilmember Peterson, because I promised, and then we'll come back to Councilmember Cook.
Susan, remind me, before the gun locker law, was it mandatory that all jurisdictions confiscate weapons in their buildings, or were they allowed to let people carry?
There was no regulation.
In other words, the idea that it was prohibited by state law to have guns in any public buildings, whatever the jurisdiction, that's not a true statement.
I actually don't know the law that was in effect previously. The town itself had an ordinance that prohibited weapons in public buildings.
And that's the way I understood it. As Councilmember Daniels said, she's absolutely right. We have a very pro-gun rights legislature. And in fact, before, municipalities could simply ask you to leave your gun in the car. And the legislature pushed back against that, said you can only do that. Look, you're going to leave them without protection. Okay, you can claim that your building is safe, but what about to and from their car to the building? You're going to leave them without their protection in an open space you don't control? That's not right. Furthermore, what about leaving it in the car? Is that very safe? I just want to make sure we get the proper context here. It was never against state law to allow your citizens to carry in your buildings if you decided. We simply had an ordinance that forbade it. And state law actually changed to be more gun rights by saying, okay, now you can only do that if you do this. And so I just want to make the point, getting into compliance is as easy as allowing the right of the people to keep and bear arms. We can do that. There's no law against that. There's a lot of ways to come in compliance. And I do find it somewhat ironic that we often bemoan how the state government will micromanage our operations and that we want local control. And yet, we have an opportunity legally to do something a little different than other jurisdictions, but all we want to do is talk about what everyone else does, and even what the state legislature does in practice. It sounds like they've got the Senate side figured out. They've got some enforcement there. That's fine. They've got security guards, metal detectors, that works. But the House side doesn't sound very safe, and it sounds like there are those who are concerned about it. So, again, we've got local control. We've got an opportunity here. I agree with Councilmember Taylor. Those would be good. I don't know about fire, to tell you the truth. The bottom line is, if you have to confront somebody who has ill intent with a weapon, I don't want anyone doing that unless they're a police officer with their own weapon and knows what to do. That's really what we're talking about here. I don't think that that's a good situation. So I think, yes, police department makes sense. Let's make an exception there. Obviously, the courts are already handled. Otherwise, the policy should be to let our law-abiding citizens provide their own protection.
Councilmember Cook.
Back to Susan. Just to understand fully, was the only option as it relates to being in compliance the locker in the states? Is that the only option that they gave us?
When I said the ordinance was intended to bring the town into compliance with state law, you had an ordinance that was not in compliance. It conflicted with state law. So you can be in compliance by having gun lockers and requesting that the guns be placed in the secure gun locker. You can also be in compliance by simply having a policy that you're not going to make that request. So the compliance part is simply that if you're going to request that somebody put a gun in a gun locker, you have to have a gun locker there that's readily accessible.
So does that say that in the state statute? I haven't read that.
Yes.
That the locker is an option for the
If you want to request that a person not carry the gun into the building, you have to have a gun locker.
Okay, second point. I'm also a CCW permit carrier. The individual that you spoke to, again, back to you, Susan, if that individual went into the house with a concealed weapon, it seems to me, from my understanding, that individual is still violating the law in carrying a firearm in the building, even though he's a CCW permit carrier and it's concealed. Is that true or false?
You said house, you mean public establishment?
Well, no. Councilmember Taylor said that this individual cannot carry it in a Senate, and they can carry it to House Representative.
Okay, I heard home like house.
Oh, excuse me, the House Representative.
Well, I have an opinion that has been researched. I've had it for years, and I've researched it. It predated this ordinance also, because the concealed carry laws were in effect prior to this ordinance. And my opinion was that when this ordinance was passed, that even if you have a concealed carry permit, that you have to comply with the request. That's correct.
Okay. That's all I wanted to, even though I know this individual felt safe, that individual was probably still not following the law. Okay.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Cooper?
I wanted to follow up on what I think I heard you say about fire department, Councilmember Peterson, and it just really it relates to the rest of the town employees. Right now, they're not allowed to carry based on the personnel rules. And if there were no gun lockers and anyone could carry in a public space, then I can just as we've heard in the national debate about arming teachers in the classrooms, I could hear employees saying we'd like to be armed to protect ourselves as well. And from a rights standpoint, I can understand that argument, but I also sometimes these things have unintended consequences, and I could see numerous situations where an employee used a weapon in maybe their mind self-defense or maybe anger or whatever. Something happened and the town became liable. And so I'm just, but as not an attorney, I'm just trying to work through that as I'm thinking it through. Susan, Mike, can you help us understand that's a what if, but again, we're trying to understand all the consequences of what this might lead to.
Mayor, Councilman Cooper, that's a real risk if you allow people to bring weapons, employees. Then they're here on the course and scope of their employment. And of course, an actual shooting, unless they're a police officer, would not be in the course and scope of their employment. But you would have your employees here, your public servants, here with weapons, not having trained them how to use them. And so it would be highly likely that the city would be named in any lawsuit. That doesn't mean they'd be liable, but they could possibly be.
Councilmember Peterson?
I just want to make it clear that I would be totally in favor of allowing our personnel, if they want to bring a weapon to work, to do that. But I do want to make a distinction here. An employee does not have a right to a job, okay? They have to come and work under the terms that we said. It's a mutually voluntary transaction. So if we want to say they can't bring a weapon, we could do that. But the reason I say I don't have a problem if they do is because we have the same problem as we do in the other case. There's no enforcement. There's nobody at the door making sure the other employees, nobody has weapons. So until we do that, I still think it's kind of a unhelpful rule when there's no meaningful enforcement of it.
Okay, we may have reached a point where we've had discussion. I'll make a comment, then I think it may be time to close the public hearing, and we'll entertain some motions. This, Councilmember Daniels, you said a couple of comments that probably reflected very much the same feeling, that our council, very strong supporters of the Constitution and Amendment 2, and we're also very aware of safety, and it may be in that statement in the preamble of promote the general welfare comes to mind, that with our current situation, and times change, and so we want to do what's right, and this is not a survey that would reflect all employees, but I did talk to about 5 of our town staff, and I just said, you know, how do you feel if someone has a gun and they come in and have a meeting with you? And they said, especially if it's someone they don't know, they would be very uncomfortable, and it would cause them to have more focus on the person and what they see there as a potential danger, and they just said it would be a distraction to the discussion, even to the point where we're a service organization that they may give an answer that they think would protect them as opposed to the answer they would typically give with the town in mind. And that's an extreme, and I'm just giving that as an example of something that has influenced me, that we want our town staff to also feel comfortable and not be in a position of having concerns in this environment. I think Chief Dorn's comments too have also caused me to reflect that it is just a challenging topic because there's so many different scenarios, and so we get to the one that we have a trained police officer and we have a good guy, and yet there's a scene where there's a bad guy that enters, and all of a sudden our police officer is in a tough situation of trying to uncover quickly what's going on. And so and our town leadership has tried to not take a position, and yet I think Chief Dorn's comments to me were very clear that there are so many risks associated with changing what we've had in the past, which in the past has typically been an environment that we wanted to promote our Second Amendment, but at the same time, in this setting of a public building, that we would find a way to allow someone to come from their car at this point, have a locker, still give them that right, conduct their business, and if there is anything that does go wrong, we have the ability to quickly have a police officer come and help us. Now, as quickly as we would like in some situations, I realize that's a risk with the option 1, but I guess the summary of what you just heard from me is I'm leaning more in the direction of the option 1. Now we're ready to close the public hearing, or did that cause any other comments? Councilmember Taylor, and then we'll close.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I would just add, times are changing, and that's why this is a good topic to discuss. And the historical record is showing that in school or in gun-free zones, that's where the tragedies are increasing. So I appreciate some of the theory of risk management, but I would just say, there are historical facts that are here, and to mitigate someone's right to protect themselves is not what government should be doing. And the historical record is trending, that gun-free zones are more and more dangerous. I mean, that's what the facts show. So I appreciate the theory. I don't have a lot of data to support some of that, but there is data to support that it's increasingly risky for the public who we represent in gun-free zones. So I'll just say.
And I think to all 6 of us, we are all focused on safety and what is the best way to provide safety now and in the future, and so these comments are appreciated. Councilmember Peterson, and then we'll close the public hearing.
I'm way beyond my 2 times to speak in Robert's rule, and I very much appreciate the indulgence. I appreciate Councilmember Taylor's comment. I think we're probably about to get outvoted here. With that in mind, I just want to address I don't even, he gives credit for the theory. I don't understand the theory even. Based on reason and rational thought, I can't understand how an honor system gun-free zone can make us any safer. I can't. I've racked my brain over it. I've tried to find my very smartest friends over the last week, challenge every single assumption that I threw at them because I wanted to know the true answer. And rationally, I cannot come to a conclusion how it makes us safer to have an honor system gun-free zone. Not only that, I think we've got the data on our side. So I guess I'm a little disappointed that I understand the emotion. Please know that I understand the emotion. We live in a culture where people don't walk around with guns on their hips. And that's really where the emotion comes from. But the reason, I don't understand it. And I would just I would beg the indulgence of anyone on the council to describe the reasonable argument how the policy will make us more safe. If I can hear that and believe that it's rational and makes sense, I will give it credit.
Vice Mayor, and I open that up if anyone wants to comment. Other than that, we did have one more request, but not wishing to speak.
Right, we'll just note for the record here that Dale Volz, V-O-L-Z, I believe, is for option 1, but does not wish to speak.
Okay. And Councilmember Peterson, I don't know if I can answer that, just so you'll know that all 6 of us are focused on safety, and this is a pros and cons on every scenario we could think of, and there's so many that it's hard to find every way possible to give 100% guarantee of safety. So I think it's a challenge, and thank you for asking the question. Councilmember Cook?
So I just want to ask about the larger lockers. In option number 1, how's that work? Do we just make an amendment to that and say, we're giving town direction for larger lockers? Help me understand how that would work. And then I'm going to come back with option number 3. Again, if we feel that the state statute is what we like to comply to, again, do we give direction for like larger lockers?
Mayor, Councilmember Cook, if council were to go with option 1 and give staff direction, when we installed the lockers, we looked at what was the likelihood of the number of guns to be brought into a building, as well as the type. We didn't feel, based on the cost of the larger lockers and the experience of whether or not people would actually bring a long rifle into our buildings, that we purchased any. We certainly can. We've got them priced and spec'd out. We can. We made the decision if someone were to come into one of our buildings with a long rifle, we would notify the police department and have them send a patrolman over in those situations.
Okay. So what I'm hearing is if option 1, and really doesn't, either one, the question is lockers or no lockers. That's really what it comes down to. And I think the direction would be, and correct me if I'm wrong, that we want to have a reasonable number of lockers to accommodate a reasonable array of weapons that might be brought in here. And sounds like we may be missing at least one size of locker that we probably, our direction would be that you do add that so we have a reasonable, I think, unless it's...
Well, a large locker could accommodate a smaller weapon too, right? So if you had couple large lockers, they would cover literally all weapons, to me. I understand the smaller ones, but I'm just trying to maximize our dollars, because I don't know how many is a statistical number of lockers you should have, but if I had large ones only, they would accommodate, to me, the majority of all weapons, correct?
Thank you.
Mayor, Councilman Cook, sure, they could.
I mean, that's what I'm thinking. One large locker or 2 large lockers could do that. If we go to option 3, again, could we give direction, again, that to comply with the state statute, that we give direction to staff for larger lockers as well. Would that be a direction that would be okay?
Yeah, Mayor, Councilmember Cook, just so I can clarify, we do have to provide one locker per one gun, so we couldn't have a large locker with multiple guns in it. Each owner would need to have their own locker with their own key.
Mayor, I think because we've spoken about this for quite some time, there may be some confusion about the options. We've had a lot of dialogue with our attorneys. I think we've gone back and forth. I think it might be helpful for us to summarize each of the options, recognizing that we've discarded option 2 at this point. But it's my understanding, and maybe I can take a shot at this for you, Susan, is that under option 1, we would require that a gun owner put their, and this would be under our own code, Gilbert's code, that we would require a gun owner to put their gun into a locker upon entering a public building, if one was available. Under option 3, we would have no code under Gilbert's municipal ordinances, but we would fall under state law, and so gun owners would still be required to install or to put their weapon into a locker. Okay, so that's option 1, and option 3 is what we have before us. I think what Councilmember Peterson is looking for is option 4, that isn't currently listed, but that would require no lockers and allow any individual of the public to be able to carry within a public building, with the exception of a public safety building. Is that what I'm understanding?
It's really what I'm suggesting was the original intent of option 3. With option 3, I would suggest you probably should clarify your policy is not only to change the ordinance to align with state law, but also that you're directing staff to ask people to give up their firearm. Because the state law doesn't tell you you have to. So you need to have that policy too.
Susan?
I don't know if you misspoke, but you mean to direct staff not to request that the...
Option 3 repeals the ordinance, right?
Yes, that's correct.
So it doesn't make clear a policy of what you're going to do with people who have weapons. It doesn't make clear any policy.
That's correct.
So what I'm saying is, no matter what you do with option 3, you need to make sure you give direct policy, direction to staff. Either they're going to ask people to give up their firearm, which they have the option to do because the lockers are already installed, or you don't ask, you ask them that they don't do that. But I still think you need to provide that direction, because state law doesn't say which way you need to go. And so if we just defer to state law, it doesn't really answer the question.
That's correct, and that's the point I was trying to make earlier. If the state law doesn't require anything other than if you want someone to give up their gun, you have to be able to put it in a gun locker. It doesn't require gun lockers.
I'm just saying if we want to go option 3 but still require people to give up their gun, just go with option 1. But you can go with option 3, but please provide the clear direction you want them to ask them to take their weapons.
Okay.
With the help that you were giving,
Trying.
I am about to close the public hearing and to ask you to put in wording a motion, and we'll see if it's clear for the 6 of us, and then we'll vote on it. Does that work? Okay. I close the public hearing on agenda item 39. Councilmember Daniels.
Thank you, Mayor Lewis. I move that we approve the Code of Gilbert, Chapter 42, amending Chapter 42, the offenses and abatement of public nuisances, by going with option A. That would keep us in compliance with state law and require a gun owner to put their weapon into a locker upon entering a public building if there was one available. Is that?
It's option 1 is what you mean.
Option 1.
Okay, so there's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Mayor?
Please.
I move to amend the motion that we not adopt option A, we adopt option 3. You can do this as long as it's germane. I promise I've studied this. Not adopt option A, but adopt option 3 with the additional direction to staff that they not ask owners, gun owners to surrender their firearms except within the police department.
Is there a second to that?
Councilmember Taylor, maybe you should, sorry. He was thinking that my motion there wasn't enough clarity in the original motion, so perhaps.
Yeah, what I'm looking to do is to just make sure if that motion carries, then there is wording that gives the direction that is intended by that motion.
Mayor and members of the council, as I understand it, you have a motion and a second for the first option.
And I seconded it, understanding that where it was at, but there can obviously be discussion about that. But right now, we have another motion that's superseding that.
But the motion to amend is to adopt a different to adopt option 3, and that's not amending it. It's saying don't have a vote on the first one.
No, actually, Robert's Rules states that an amendment can be made to a motion so long as it's germane to the motion. If you can amend it to say not, I've looked at the rules. You can amend it to say not adopt. You can do that. That we not ask for people to have their firearms. It's in the rules, and I can show you.
Mr. Mayor, and members of the council, I believe that's in conflict, and I don't think it's germane to that motion. You have a motion and a second for a option 1. To say I want to amend the motion to say let's do option 3 instead, I don't believe is germane to the motion.
Okay. Well, what we should do is this, because Susan, we've followed this procedure, so I can see where Councilmember Peterson is coming from. But I think after a meeting, let's have some more dialogue. So for future meetings, but we have. I mean, this has been kind of a process we followed, and yet on your amendment, I haven't heard a second yet, and that's probably because you were talking. Did you want to second that? And did you hear it?
Mayor, I did not hear it because just following Councilmember Daniels' motion.
Can I just make it, this has been our practice, even though I have also, like our council, maybe I don't understand Robert's rules, but it does seem like it's just the opposite motion, and maybe it's allowed, maybe it isn't. It's been our practice recently to allow this, and so my thought, without getting into all I would even allow this Councilmember Peterson's vote to occur, the one that he wants to occur. Let it happen. If you want to rescind your motion.
I do not. I wish, Mayor, if we could take a 5-minute recess and allow us to work out the logistics of the amendments and motions, that would probably save some of the public's time and allow staff to confer with the mayor and see where we need to fall.
It's a good time to stand up, and we'll take a 5-minute recess. Thank you for the discussion, and the recess has ended. I'll wait for Vice Mayor Cooper to return, along with Councilmember Cook. Thank you. Let's continue. So, based on some discussion that was occurring through the recess, Councilmember Peterson.
Oh, Mayor, there actually is a way, if I knew all the words of the ordinance, that I could reverse it and be in order. But I couldn't simply say not to the first motion. I'd have to go into the ordinance and insert not wherever I needed it. That would be in order. So it's funny, in Robert's rule, there's a difference there. The effect would be the same, but I'm probably not doing it the right way, so I think my motion's out of order. So I'll withdraw my motion and we'll go forward.
Thank you. So we have a motion and a second. Do we need any, and I appreciate Councilmember Taylor, the clarification. Do you feel like we need to have some further clarification? Are you ready to vote?
I'm good.
Okay, all right. Please vote. All right, that passes with a 4-2 vote. Thank you. We move to administrative items. And it looks like the administrative item is our boards, commissions, and committee reports, so I will not read the verbiage on the agenda. Do we have some reports on number 40? Councilmember Daniels?
Mayor Lewis, I regret to say that the bus system is still on strike, and unfortunately, I did see many citizens as I was driving around town today still waiting for the bus, and our police chief and our fire chief have both been very helpful to help get the word out, and even to keep an eye out for those citizens who may not have heard yet that our bus system is on strike. And so we will do our best to keep the public updated through our website. I know RPTA's website or Valley Metro's website is also being updated on a regular basis. But until further notice, Mayor, we have no bus service in the town of Gilbert.
Thank you. Councilmember Peterson?
Are we allowed to ask a question of legal counsel on a current event? Because there's something I'm curious about related to that.
I'll look for some direction on that.
The Attorney General's office has said that you can only ask clarifying questions such as, what was that date again? Tell me again what you said. You can't discuss, or you could not ask me, or the town attorney.
Thank you. Anything else on agenda item 40? Agenda item 41, future meetings. I think I covered the topic in the study session, so I'll move on. 42, Town Manager Banjer, anything else?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor, members of the council. One more thing. Rod Buchanan will start his first day as Gilbert's new Parks and Rec Director on Monday. So we look forward to Rod joining the team. I'd also like to take the opportunity to thank Melanie Dykstra, who served as interim Parks and Rec Director for over a year in that capacity. She did a great job, and we're glad.
Is this a gold medal clap for Melanie?
Gold medal clap. And we thank her for her service.
Thank you. Agenda item 43, report from town council members on current events. And it's good to be back together.
Mayor Lewis, sorry. One current event.
Please.
I would like to remind our citizens that school is starting in Gilbert in the next couple of days, Monday and Wednesday start times. I know our Chandler School District has already gone back to school, so the southern portion of our community is already back in school, but please look for children as you're driving around and make sure that we're aware of those school zones. I think that's an important aspect of our community. We want to keep them safe.
Thank you. And agenda item 44, a report from the mayor on current events. I was just going to say it's good to have the group back. I hope we all had some good summer time with family and friends, and with school starting, I think we're ready to keep rolling as a council and look forward to the month of August with our retreat coming up. And with that, meeting adjourned.
Good job. Thank you.